Hello and welcome to today's webcast on the future of retail, how Edge AI is transforming the industry, brought to you by Insight and Intel. Below this webcast, you will see an attachments tab where you can navigate to after this webinar. There, you can find additional information on assets regarding today's topic. I would now like to turn over this presentation to our speakers, Carm Taglienti, Insight's Chief Data Officer, and Kristen Call, Intel's Senior Industry Advisor. Carm and Kristen, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Carter, and thank you, Kristen, for joining us once again for this webcast. And really love to talk about this topic, and I love talking about it with you. So today we'll be talking about Edge AI, of course, one of the areas where clearly there's a lot of focus these days, and we're going to get into some of the details about how it works and how you can take advantage of it as a customer in the space. So let's just talk about the importance first. So here we think about what are some of the things that you might want to take into consideration as you think about Edge AI, especially as it relates to retail, but we'll talk about some other verticals as we go. But in general, we really want to think about things like operational efficiency, for example, or security, because anytime that we talk about AI, we talk about data that could potentially be sensitive. Certainly, it's sensitive in the context of maybe it's information that is related to IP of the organization, or if you're capturing things like, say, customers on video, you want to ensure that you're protecting that data. And there's just a number of reasons that you want to ensure that there's security built into the solutions that you would create. The other part of this is that AI, as we are all very well aware of, helps us with understanding how to do things more in an automated form, so it can generate workforce satisfaction. Things like I don't have to watch the camera to determine whether or not there's theft happening in my store, for example. So these are things that I think are really important to us overall. So workforce satisfaction is a big one. And I found, and Kristen, I'm sure you did too, over time, we start to see solutions that are really, helping to remove some of those mundane tasks that a lot of individuals do, especially in the Gen AI case. So this is an important part, and probably one that goes a bit unnoticed because it's not really quantitatively measured. It's more of a qualitative statistic. Health and safety, another big one. So this is sort of as it relates to things like how do we not sort of expose the individuals to threatening situations potentially. In camera observations, just another good one too. So if AI is looking for things like, maybe use cases of theft that could exist within a store or on a location, then notifying maybe 911 or getting the right types of individuals involved. So it can help with things like health and safety, not exposing you to threatening situations. The customer experience, of course, gets better, especially on the generative AI side, where you can either interact more effectively with customers in the support sense, or just help to maybe navigate or direct around the retail facility in order to be able to find the things that you're looking for. Clearly, and when we start talking about this, Kristen will talk a lot about things like scalability and what Intel's doing to help make this a more scalable platform so that we can start to add additional features and capabilities overall to the platform. So that's super important to us. And then, of course, AI is all about the data. So data-driven decision-making is super critical to what it is that we are looking at. And then we should all be concerned with things like resource optimization as it relates to sustainability. So we hear a lot about sort of the use of power consumption, greenhouse gas emissions. So these are things that we want to be sensitive to and be more environmentally conscious. So we think about using what we require in order to accomplish our goal, but not overusing them and not over committing to resources. So this is an important part of this too, and Intel's doing a lot of work in this space to help us to be able to ensure that we are being sustainable as we think about these kinds of advanced capabilities. So what does that mean overall? Transformation innovation is key. Improved performance is expected, and then reducing cost and risk, and of course, becoming more sustainable. So, Kristen, I don't know if you have anything to add on that front, but clearly, this is an important area for us.
Yeah, no, very thorough. We're going to jump into a little bit of those concepts later in some of the architectural drawings that we have, but I think that what you're saying here is let's look at the use cases. Let's not look at the technology. Yes, Edge, AI is really important, but let's identify the use cases that are going to drive real value for the business. and then we will find the right technology to apply it. And where the biggest leaps are happening is with AI. And then how do you get it at the edge, right? So many people understand the AI in the cloud. How do you get that AI at the edge? And we're going to talk more about that.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I love the focus around solving the business problem, because I think in many ways, I'll call it the next generation of AI, as we like to call it these days, really sort of brought on this concept of increasing the art of the possible. So there's so many new things that we can do or contemplate getting done as it relates to not just the advances in the hardware capabilities that we can bring to the point of presence on the edge, but it's also the kinds of techniques that we can use in order to help us to achieve some of those business outcomes that we might be thinking of. Okay, and here are some examples, but in retail, I've already sort of alluded to this, leveraging cameras, computer vision, in order to be able to do more with those camera feeds that we already have. So now we can do things like maybe it's theft prevention or inventory control, or even protecting the safety of the folks that may work in those facilities, or increasing the customer experience. And this is just through taking advantage of things like camera feeds, and then being able to apply AI techniques as it relates to being able to work with those camera feeds and understand the objects that might be existing, identification of them. But we also think about how we can integrate them into the other systems, point of sale systems, or other motion detection systems, maybe throughout the store, in order to increase the benefit of the experience for the consumer. So these are all really important characteristics and use cases that you probably see every day. And Kristen will talk about some of those potential use cases too when we think about the store of the future. So really important part. And then from an enterprise perspective, as I was talking about, it really is the art of the possible. And we've seen a lot of this across the board, but it usually we see within the context of AI and the application of AI, there's really, I'll call it 4 separate categories. I'll start on the far right, but basically it has to do with coding. So if you are an organization that develops a lot of code, you can see improvements in code production, or the ability to create code that's more efficient, more effective, less buggy, or even that complies with maybe security approaches that might be in place today. So maybe they comply with the policies that you might have. So how do you not make the same mistakes that you might have made in the past, and take advantage of the wisdom of the crowd, so to speak, by using things like Copilot for GitHub, or other coding techniques that allow you to be able to take advantage of generative AI in that context. And so we have seen as much as 30%, maybe more, in terms of, I'll call it developer productivity, or coding efficiency, which can be realized by organizations. So that's one really important one if you are an organization that develops code. The other 3 are really just more related to sort of the use cases as it relates to generative AI, or the collection of data, and taking advantage of it in the data-driven decision-making process that I was describing earlier. So finding information, so being able to collect your data, or maybe not even collect it and move it. So historically, we moved data all over the place and put it into a data lake, a data warehouse, or a lake house, or whatever you wanted to call it. But these days now, what we can see is that with large language model capabilities and the move toward things like the fabric, we can basically just have linkages to sources of data, and then using AI techniques, we can issue queries against those data sources, discover data that might be in those data sources, and then allows us to be able to find information that might be valuable to us, especially for those tasks that might be more mundane. Like, for example, providing support to end users. Providing support might require you to hit 6 different systems, aggregate the information, and then provide a result. Well, we can now do that by using AI, goal-seeking techniques, agent technology. It can all be driven from the edge. So these are really important capabilities. Summarization's another big one. So this really just has to do with the concept of collecting multiple feeds of information, or information from multiple sources, or even multiple decisions as it relates to AI, and then including those together to be able to make decisions. So summarization is also a pretty valuable technique that we would use as part part of sort of the next generation of AI. And then finally, creation. So this is the production of, and generative AI is really mostly about generative. So it has to do with creating things, and normally it's language, but it could be creating images that can help to support things like, potentially if you're interacting with a customer, for example, if they're looking for something that might look like a picture that they might have, or maybe you can help to draw their attention to something that they might be interested in by using visual techniques. The creation of these kinds of images can help them to have a better experience, or you could even use it for generating textual or voice-to-text kinds of interactions with customers or even support staff in order to increase your productivity overall. So these 3 use cases, or 4 with the coding side, become really the focus of where we're going today in terms of how we apply and use AI overall. And Kristen, I'll throw it over to you just to see if you've had any specific use cases that you might have run into, or maybe anything else you might see in this space.
Well, I think that, this is a great slide from just the perspective of all the personas you just mentioned. There's so many different personas that use this architecture or these kinds of use cases, or whatever term you want to use. But you've got, typically when we're talking to IT, they're like, I totally get it. Oh, code optimization, this is, I'd love that, right? But as you kind of creep back, if you look at the left-hand side, we get your sales, your marketing, your finance. There you can take advantage of this technology in these separate business units. And oftentimes when we talk to our business partners, it's a separate technology, right? It's a technology for you, it's a technology for you, and it's always separate. But when we're talking about AI and Gen AI and those kinds of things, it's one technology that can benefit the entire enterprise. And I think that's a really unique conversation that we don't often get to have. And so this slide really kind of pulls that all together.
Yeah, it's a really great point, and it's true. We really should be thinking about all aspects of it, because it's sort of a holistic kind of solution domain, if you will. Even if you're not really a coding company, you're using code that someone is generating from someplace. It's taking advantage of some of these capabilities as well, but you're really just sort of focusing on the find, summarize, and create side of the house.
Yeah.
So let's turn our attention a little bit to reimagining what retail looks like, and Kristen, I'll pass it off to you to drive this one.
Yeah, I think that, the basics of this slide is how Insight and Intel are working together, right? We're really helping our customers apply these different technologies to continue that digital transformation. And there's all kinds of benefits. And, Carm, you kind of talked through a lot of those, but this is kind of the quick hits of enhancing the customer experience. The employee experience is so important today, uplifting that experience for employees, and then the health and safety, the improved security, operational efficiency, and scalability. All these things that we've kind of gone through. And these are just the basic, because I always say we're always limited to our imagination, right? But when we talk to our customers, we really ask our customers what's your personality? What do you guys want to go do? Because this is just kind of the baseline, right? These are just kind of things that say, these are the things that I can have today. These are the things that are moving forward in the retail space. But it's really not limited to these at all. Any comments on that, Carm?
Yeah, I think that, and it's really a great set of capabilities or benefits that you're describing here. And I think in a lot of ways, certainly the retail industry is driven by, low margins, and we're trying to make sure that we can do as much as we possibly can with the revenue or the investments that we have. And I think AI can help us to do that more effectively. So it's sort of helping us to sort of drive toward that art of the possible without necessarily having to throw human resources at it. And so I think it just allows us to be able to start to think about, what kinds of things can I do by freeing up some of those talented resources that we have from those mundane tasks that they might have to focus on these days. And in just some of these are some of the areas that we focus on, but there are so many more that are coming. And I'm sure you've seen this too, Kristen. And when we talk to customers, it's like, they'll come up with 20 or 30 different opportunities that they have for how can they make the experience better in the store? How can they make productivity better? And so I find that it's really opening up this whole floodgate of new opportunity. And so I think it really isn't, it doesn't mean adding tons and tons of resources or tons and tons of investment. It really just has to do with understanding how to use the technology. And I think we're going to start to see big change in the way that we in retail, that is, but also in terms of how we innovate.
Yep. And I think on the next slide, I think we're going to talk, kind of hit like, what do you mean, Carm? What are you talking about?
That's right.
I mean, this sounds really hard, right? But, this is not a news story for me. This is one of the reasons I came over to Intel, because working in the industry for 25 plus years, it was really like, there's got to be a better way to deploy software in the store, right, at the edge. And it can't be every time I want a new solution, I've got to go find the hardware, and then I've got to go deploy the hardware, and then I've got to set up the network, and I've got all these configurations that I got to do in order to satisfy my business partners' need for that use case. And so what you're really seeing here is that transition. How can I move my store architecture from these monolithic, siloed applications that need specific hardware requirements to the right, where it's more interoperable, it's open, it can share the same, the application can stay on the same hardware and take advantage of these things. So it's really virtualization, containerization. This architecture is where the benefits lie when Carm saying, hey, my business partner is asking for this and they want to go do this. I can now take the space that I have on that hardware and deploy it through a container, or I can virtualize it. So it is, I always get the question like, what's the advantage of going from right to left? Because it's sometimes hard to, really quantify. And I think the easiest answer is it's now I can get to the speed of business where instead of just putting in my backlog, getting to it later, we can really start to brainstorm how we can get these out faster without having these roadblocks where I got to roll a truck and put new hardware in. Carm, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, one thing that you said that I really want to emphasize is, moving left to right, but also sort of moving on the right-hand side of the picture, moving bottom to top. So Intel makes it really easy for us to be able to create that container-based solution, which gives us a level of abstraction. So when we run on a platform-based architecture, or Intel works with us to create blueprints for this is how we should be using the processors in the virtual machine environments that we want to maximize in order to be able to realize the application or business outcome that we're looking for. But we do that through containerization, and we want to make it as easy as possible to be able to do that. And then workload placement, along with scalability and resiliency and high availability, just come with it. And it's amazing then that that Intel works to help us to drive, I'll call it these simple solutions, but they're really just an evolution in terms of how we think about deploying applications. And it just, that's really innovative, I think.
Yeah, well said. And I think one more thing that this image doesn't talk about, because we're talking about AI, right? And a lot of people, when they think about AI, computer vision, they think GPU. Mm-hmm. And the truth is you don't need a GPU in every case. And that's what Intel is working with our ISV partners, with Insight, to pull those through. What is the right compute for the right job, right? And that's what we're really working on. And we understand the complexity of a GPU, adding what Carm mentioned earlier, sustainability, right? The hardware that you're putting into your stores they're long life. Right? These aren't going to be things you want to recycle every 2 years. You got thousands of locations, hundreds of locations. Recycling is not that easy. So even me, Intel sells GPUs, but we want to bring the right solution to the right problem. We don't want to force function something. And Intel is really working hard to utilize the CPU, the NPU, the GPU, whatever it might be, to utilize all of the assets that you have.
Yeah, very well said. And I think the workload placement's the key here, right? So Intel's sort of focusing on this, put the right workload in the right location is going to be critical to that.
Yep. So I'll just touch on this, but it's really that continued journey for the omni solutions, right? So retail's a big world, a lot of things happening where our customers work online, they're looking at a product. What does that transition look like when a customer is really, when they're looking to make that purchase? We know that stores aren't going away, but the complexities are not decreasing. So, how do we help digitize that journey, that customer journey, the end-to-end solutions for the edge to cloud, all the integrations across the departments and the data sets, the modularity for the rapid innovation, and of course, do it in a secure and performant network.
Yeah, and so we just wanted to just quick use case, but just to sort of describe, and I like to talk about hybrid architectures. And so this is an example of where, we have edge and cloud combined together, and, certainly Intel runs anywhere. So it's not really necessarily a matter of edge only, but I think we need to think about it in context of it's not one versus the other. So in general, we need to think about how do we create collaborative environments. And I love this sort of, I'll call it data affinity, but I also use the term point of presence. So in a lot of ways, it's sort of the making sure that you're running your applications where they need to run. And Kristen already brought up this topic of workload placement. So we want to make sure that we can distribute the applications to where they want to be. So in this particular case, the challenge, again, business focused challenge, which is related to manual processes and sort of helping them to become a better data-driven decision-making organization. And in this case, there was just some initiatives around moving to the cloud, for example, or looking at how things can be more hybrid. And so basically it's sort of how do they create sort of a tandem approach, which is leverage the cloud when the cloud makes the most sense, but also understand when you have to run applications on the edge, how can you maximize their ability to do so, but also ensure that there's providing the same level of cybersecurity protections as well as compute protections as well. So these are really important considerations as you think about what kinds of solutions you might be providing. And as I said, the outcomes here are just really driven by ensuring that the posture is the same across your now larger, I'll call it ecosystem, which includes the edge. And we all know this as we start to move more toward hybrid architectures across the edge, we increase our security footprint. So we need to think about like, how do we protect these environments? The compute and the workload placement might be great, and it might be wonderful that we run there, but we have to protect it as well. And it was kind of a topic we talked about a little bit earlier. But also there's sort of the, how do we collect the data? So the BI that comes from it, business intelligence, the data assets, how do we move and migrate them? Where do we make those decisions? How do we understand high availability? And so these are all considerations as we think about the creating these kinds of distributed architectures by leveraging the platform that we were discussing. So really important as you think about what some of these things might look like. Now, in general, I really like to think about this too. It's not just a matter of saying, hey, we bought some hardware, we're good to go. It's really just a matter of understanding how all of these things fit together. So how does the modern data platform, the modern architectural platform on the edge or in the cloud, how does that all work together? So we basically think about it in the context of strategy and governance, understanding what data assets we have, where they are, where they exist. How do we think about business intelligence or standard analytics? And then how do we think about artificial intelligence and optimize it for either the data infrastructure or the cloud? And so bringing them all together, though, is really the critical part of all of this. So being able to take advantage of those capabilities like Kristen was talking about. So it's like whether it's a GPU or standard CPUs or accelerated computing, how do I take advantage of that and which one is most appropriate for my workload and having the ability to distribute it. So that's really an important characteristic of this is understanding not only the characteristics of your application, but also what it is you're trying to accomplish in the most effective way possible. And it does require a degree of maturity around all of these areas in order to make sure that you get it right. Not so much, of course, it is about sustainability and it's about making sure that you don't waste computing power. but also at the end of the day, you just want to do the right thing, especially as it relates to decision making. So if you don't have the correct data, if you're not analyzing the right set of information, if you're not able to process it properly, then you're probably not going to make the right decisions. And so that's ultimately what you want to do. So that's really at the end of the day what we're trying to focus on. And it does require a level of maturity, and it requires a level of sophistication where this all comes together very nicely. So based on that, I know you can't ask any questions, but if you do have questions, feel free to scan the QR code, and Kristen and I can answer your questions, or you can take the next step in your journey by contacting us. We'd love to set up an ideation session or a workshop and work with you to understand how we can help you to solve these kinds of problems that Kristen and I have been talking about today.